on? I'm Captain Logan.
And I'm Brandon.
And Brandon and I are going to tell you how we felt about Star Trek Lower Decks, the pilot that I can't say I was real excited about watching based on the trailer and based on Kurtzman and all the folks that have been making Star Trek lately, which I've been having to say in air quotes, Star Trek, but obviously always willing to be won over by a thing, but was not walking into this with any high hopes.
Sure.
My standards were very low. Was not going to take all that much to really impress me with this material.
Sure.
And it just immediately before it even came out felt like the least relevant thing imaginable. The only people really talking about the show are people that are already kind of burned on modern Star Trek and are upset about everything that's coming out. So anything that we see now, we're hearing a lot of Star Trek fans going, "Oh God!" and look at this, giant, what looks like a dumpster fire that's about to come out. There are, I'm sure, some folks that are liking New Trek that were looking forward to this. To kind of yet another new kind of take and spin on Star Trek. Let's do a comedy animated series and see how in sort of the Rick and Morty style, see how that susses out. I don't understand why you would even want to make that. I don't know why you'd start from that place. Everything about this feels really strange and anachronistic and random, and it's like it feels like we're trying to bring in a crowd that is not currently interested, which is what we've been doing all along anyway. And so now it's like, let's get the kind of raunchy animated comedy crowd to come and watch a Star Trek thing. All right, and I don't want that, and that's not a thing that immediately appeals to me. But I'm walking into this going, all right, on that level, is this any good? So we've now watched the pilot, and How'd you feel about it, Brandon?
So this, I didn't have much of hopes for it either. I thought the animation style looked like typical run-of-the-mill, even less. I'm a big fan of Rick and Morty, but I like a lot of the science behind it.
That's part of why I wanted you here for this.
Yeah. I didn't
because you
like
are the crowd this is aiming at, and specifically because you're a Star Trek fan and a Rick and Morty fan.
Right. I didn't feel in the end that they pulled off that connection very well. I will say that. Just and it was way too fast. But this was
Connection.
way too.
What do you mean?
Just that, they tried to combine. They tried to combine these two areas, and I don't feel like it worked very well, at all even. And so my fandom of both, it didn't pull me in that direction.
Yeah.
It's clear they were trying to do that.
Isn't that a tall order in the first place?
It really is. I mean, you're working with people in the. It's different when you have.
It's such a counterintuitive choice.
I agree with that especially because something like Star Trek is very serious in its take on the reality and the nature of the science that they use, but something like Rick and Morty takes
used to be.
It used to be.
Yeah.
And Rick and Morty takes science to its fanciful, theorized ending in a way, that's kind of just.
And I know folks are going to say Star Trek gets science wrong all the time, and a lot of Star Trek shows get real loosey goosey with it. Yeah, I get that.
Right.
But comparatively.
Yes, and comparatively, but then you get the like in Rick and Morty, you take things just like a couple of steps further than it should otherwise be taken, and you get kind of this something that's based on this science that's just so far out there but still works.
Yeah, because it's an absurdist piece in the first
exactly.
place.
This did not pull those together.
An in-universe absurdist piece, and I don't know how you do that.
I don't either. They don't either.
I think you can do a Star Trek show with a more comedic tone than other Star Trek shows, and it still fit in the same world. Just
Certainly.
like you could do a Star Trek show with a generally darker tone that you also buy fits in that world. It just needs to start from a situational place in the first place.
You have major evidence of that being a thing you can do because you have certain episodes in things that do that.
Yeah.
And they do that really well
and
on both ends of the spectrum.
I'll also go this far. If this was the premise for a show that took itself more seriously, and seemed to fit in the general world, if not canon, of Star Trek, this as a premise is a place where I could buy it being more comedic. Like the notion
Certainly.
of let's follow the lower crewmen that nobody cares about on the ship and see what they're doing and see how kind of irritating it is to not get any of the glory and to have to sleep in smaller quarters, or the really absurd thing this does where they're sleeping in hallways, which I don't buy at all.
I did not buy that at all either.
And stuff like that. Like that can still be a more or less funny show. Mm-hmm. In exactly the same way that the premise that you have for DS9 is going to just inherently lead to darker stories that you would tell. But this is just, let's do a parody of Star Trek with the name Star Trek on it.
And it's set in the prime universe of things, like original next gen continuity type,
All of that is so complicated.
Yeah, I understand.
Allegedly, it all is now, and like we just had Picard, which sort of is supposed to also, but because it's animated and because it's going to a parody place, for whatever reason, Kurtzman and the studio are allowing them to make it look more like what we grew up with, mm-hmm. with TNG era, and it's just post that, so this looks like it's I forget what the date was, but it's obviously post Nemesis,
sure.
And so. You've got, and actually it's funny because if you want to get real technical with it, which I don't, but you could you could point out certain things that look too much like TNG because they're just trying to kind of tug at your nostalgia strings that we have already gotten past and seen later iterations of, that we've kind of gone backwards now. And I'm only bringing this up to say that they're trying to have their cake and eat it too, and failing at that in like every possible way in this. So like in the way you're talking about, where like it's trying to be both Star Trek and a farce and parody of Star Trek at the same time. So like you said, it's not melding the Rick and Morty thing with Star Trek, because I don't even know how you do that. I think you could maybe get away with it better than they're managing, but I still don't know exactly what that looks like.
If you were to
the whole thing is just too kind of obvious and generic and least common denominator to me.
Yeah.
But also, they're failing at the make me sort of buy it in the canon of this world thing too, not just in the fact that it's a farce and the fact that people are using too much modern slang and stuff, and that everybody's just too jokey because it's a cartoon, but also like it's a TNG holodeck. But we don't use those anymore. We don't have the grid holodecks at this point. Like Voyager's using this whole other looking system. Why would you go backwards and still have that and stuff like that? So like that's not why this show isn't working.
Certainly.
But I'm just saying that that's one small example of how these things are not blending.
So if you did want the merger of these two areas to work well, you would have to have somebody running the show or designing the show that actually was an expert in one or the other. And I don't think we've got either of them.
Well, I mean, it's the showrunner is one of the creators of Rick and Morty, so you do have one side of that.
Okay.
Yes, you have an expert in Rick and Morty. He co-created the show.
Okay.
How's he not an expert?
Well, I'd say more like...
Are you saying that was the guy who wasn't any good at it? I don't know anything about
it. Maybe the experts in the execution, like the animation.
I see what you're saying, yeah.
And style like that, and...
Well, and let me throw out positives real quick because it won't take long. At least for me.
Coming in strong there, Cap.
It's weird, right? This feels like a show that it sort of feels like a show that somebody actually wanted to make, which I'm kind of surprised that I'm saying. This is a weird phenomenon that I'm not sure I've had very often, where I can tell that the people behind this are maybe enjoying what they're making, but that is not infectious to me. It's a quality looking show for this kind of animation.
Yes, I would agree
the
with that.
storyboarding is all really good. I like how the colors are popping. Like, it looks fine for this sort of thing. Mm-hmm. Obviously, I can't help but appreciate their reverence for at least the look of the Star Trek I grew up with.
Yes, and I did notice that as well.
That they miss LCARs. They miss the look of those ships. They miss species that we haven't really played with much since TNG. There's a Benzite very early. We've got Andorians walking around, and you've got Bolians. It sort of looks like, that era, and so that's kind of fun. There's, all these references to things that we weren't sure after Star Trek went off the air you'd ever get references to again, but it's all surface. That's all you really get is just a bunch of references, and it doesn't...
Just a bunch of references is right.
I mean, that's kind of my review. It's just a bunch of references. I'm not saying that there's not a story. It's not really a compelling story. It's kind of an obvious story. But it's basically just you have a girl who's one of the lower decks crewmen who used to be higher up in the chain of command, but she breaks the rules all the time, kind of like Riker did in his early career, because she's trying to do the right thing as opposed to just following the rules. That's getting her into trouble. That's what the show is telling me is happening. She seems, in her actions, to just be really reckless to me, where she just does whatever
she doesn't even care.
Comes to mind, and then retroactively we're told she always did the right thing. She has very much that Michael Burnham thing of she is perfect. You've not watched Discovery, but she can do no wrong. She is perfect, and I get the sense that she will be that way the whole series. Hopefully not, but I doubt very seriously if that character has anything to learn. There is a mentor for the kind of bumbling idiot ensign character who wants to be a captain someday, and at the end they kind of band together because he manages to sort of do something right, but mostly on accident, and that makes her decide that he might be captain material. So I'm going to help you get there, and. At least I will say this: at least the characterizations, if not somewhat kind of archetypal, are at least concrete, and I know what the characters are about. They're too one note, but everything about this, as I predicted, at least from this first episode, is much more coherent and easy to follow than any of the new Star Trek we've had. I was pretty darn sure it would be like this. In a technical story execution way, this is the best thing they've made so far. Which,
judging by how I felt about it, which will be revealed soon.
Yeah,
that's not saying a lot.
That's not. Yeah. It's really not. And I just on a technical level, I'm not saying that there aren't some ideas and some acting and things in both Discovery and Picard that aren't potentially interesting. And Discovery has a couple of episodes that I was surprised to like as well as I did compared to the rest of the shows. It's weird comparing these things, but I figured that this would be more coherent and less kind of preachy and in your face about its politics than those shows have been. And yeah, it's that. So I guess I can say that for it.
So, did you feel like when watching this that they I felt like they were doing what they could to up the raunchiness factor, but if they were going to do that, they should have been able to do more, but they couldn't, so it was holding it back. Because I felt a little bit like what they were doing just didn't fit.
Who is this show for?
Yeah, it didn't.
Who's it for?
Fit.
It's like we gotta have gross black sludge coming out of people's faces when we have sort of a zombie virus, because we're not gonna go full on and do blood, but we are gonna have an open chest with somebody pumping a heart, but no blood. And I totally hear what you're saying, but I have this weird knee-jerk reaction when you say that, Brandon, because you're they're not going far enough, but that kind of raunchiness and just for the sake of being silly with the Star Trek name on it and telling us it's canonical, none of that computes in my brain. And so the best this show could possibly give us is a thing that should not exist but is a lot of fun and is maybe even telling some cool stories within that anyway. And maybe it will eventually kind of get there.
It might find its footing.
It might find that, but the best it can possibly do is be a giant misstep again. This is not, and I'm not surprised, of course,
right.
But I have to say it because we're reviewing it. This is a big part of the review. It's still not Star Trek, and it's still just dancing around it because the people in charge continue to either not get what made Star Trek appealing to people, or they don't like it and feel the need to transform it into something else now that they have the reins of it. I am convinced that some of the, particularly, I forget his name, but the main producer on this who co-created Rick and Morty, I'm convinced that guy loves Star Trek and kind of gets Star Trek, and that...
Well, it's either like Dan Harmon or Justin Roiland, right?
I think it's that guy, and he's not going to be allowed, it's not Harmon, he's not going to be allowed to actually to make Star Trek stories that are about the stuff Star Trek was always about.
Like
really,
real cerebral
it's all
stuff.
Well, that, and also not modern cynical, because this still kind of has that. Less so some. I at least out of the gate than the other two shows, I guess, kind of. But does this feel like a remotely utopian world to you? Like, you know, all the trappings are there. You've got people, you know, spewing the platitudes to some degree about. Well, I guess we don't even really talk too much about that here, about, you know, in inclusiveness and, you know, everybody working together and that kind of thing. You know, infinite diversity and all of that. Like, if this was, and I would feel sad if anybody did this, this is the first Star Trek thing you saw, it would be sort of like Star Trek 09, where you wouldn't really get what the kind of mission statement is.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that makes it good. I'm saying that's where you start from. You know, and of course we're still not really doing that. We kind of just want to make fun of the, you know, all the main stuff everybody knows already. And now is just absolutely not the right time. Like, if this had come out a few years ago, you at least wouldn't have had the Orville, which obviously did it way, way better. And both in being Star Trek and being a comedy, and blending those two things together.
No kidding.
I'm convinced this happens as an answer to that, and it's a mistake to do it the way they're doing it, because that show is so nuanced and evolves into some of the smartest Star Trek we ever had. If it's Star Trek, and it's just so weird because this has Star Trek in the title, and it doesn't read like Star Trek, and Orville is not Star Trek but is Star Trek,
and Orville had more Star Trek guest stars on it, you know, than even some Star Trek shows had guest stars.
Well, sure, but that's also, I mean, that's beside the point. That show's being half made by Trek alum. Like,
that's true.
I mean, Braga is one of the main writers on that show. Like,
did you also...
No, it is a Star Trek show. It's halfway made by Star Trek people.
So we had in Lower Decks. First of all, do you buy that Lower Decks are just referred to as, like, the people in the Lower Decks are just referred to as Lower Decks in this hierarchy?
I really dislike that.
I really dislike that as well, because I'm like, this is not how this operates in this future.
And of course, you can't just have a title for a show. You have to constantly say it.
And like I always thought that was
seconds.
hokey when you find the title of the thing inside the thing, but sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. Well,
it's even worse with this.
Yeah, because they're just like, she's referred to, one of the main characters is referred to as Lower Decks. Like, get in line, Lower Decks. And okay, and there was a spot where our main character, you mentioned references earlier. There's a whole string of dialogue where she's just throwing out reference after reference after reference. Deanna Troi. There were specific circumstances, and it's just like, we're literally just making callbacks to things and episodes from actual Trek.
Well, even worse than that,
she shouldn't have any idea about, number one.
Well, but even worse than that is they're not even all that specific. It's just,
some of them were, but most of them were not. But
like, what? The fact that Troy changed uniforms at some point?
No. Like, there was, I can't remember exactly which one it was, but I was like, okay, why is she calling to that specifically?
But none of them were things that aren't, for the most part, kind of like in the zeitgeist and people know. Like, there's some small, the Chadich line, like, you've got to know something.
Yes.
You know, to get that in there.
That was the thing I was thinking of.
I guess that's not in that string. No,
it's not. That's in a different area.
That's way earlier in the episode. But yeah, so like, and that was the only line in the whole episode that almost sort of made me chuckle, but not really. Like, I didn't laugh one time during this. You didn't either.
No. I almost broke a smile for something, but
I got close.
And then we get to the end of the episode, and there's a line, and she goes, "What can we do to make this stop, please?" And I turn to you and I go, "What can we do to make this stop, please?"
Yeah.
Like, how apropos at the end of the episode.
It's also really unfortunate when you have a character in the middle of a show that's supposed to be not just funny, but like slapstick and laugh out loud. Like every 20 seconds you're supposed to be laughing.
Right.
Pretty clearly. And
especially with the speed of dialogue.
Yeah, and all the gags are just really kind of obvious and typical, and again generic. And I'm not laughing. And then you have a character who in the middle of the episode makes a joke and nobody thinks it's funny, and somebody just goes, just says something along the lines of, "Oh yeah, like hilarious," and I'm like, that's how I feel the whole episode. Hilarious! Like, I couldn't believe somebody in this did that, because I'm doing that the whole time I'm watching it.
So we had a lot of dialogue in this that was on par with the pace of something like a children's cartoon, like a younger children's cartoon. I've seen some of these ones where they're talking very fast paced, and they're making jokes.
A lot of
like
the adult shows
books.
do that too.
Some of them, fair. But like it's not my like. Rick and Morty's not that fast paced. There might be lines where they're arguing and you get fast dialogue, but the whole thing isn't that way. That's never been like my kind of cup of tea, honestly.
Yeah, they made, but it's just that I forget her name, the kind of main girl in this. Like, they just made that her personality. She talks fast. Well, yeah, I guess the Boimer or whatever does that too.
Yeah, but okay, so that's another thing that speaks at like I don't like.
And how much of that is just
names aren't sticking
memorable?
With me.
They're not sticking with you. Yeah. How much of what you're talking about is like just going for a percentage, where you're just throwing a lot of things out and hoping somebody laughs at something?
That's kind of what I was feeling. I didn't have the words to explain it the way you did, but that's kind of how I was feeling through that those bits and exchanges. It's one thing when you have a show like, and I'm a secret fan of Gilmore Girls.
I think Eric maybe is too. I don't want to throw him under the bus. I feel like he told me that he's watched some of that too. Like he had a girlfriend at one point that he watched that with and had some good things to say about it.
I really liked the interaction between Alexis Bledel and Lauren Graham. And they talked really fast. But I thought that they had good chemistry together as mother and daughter. And that's one of the things, that was my introduction to Melissa McCarthy too, but that's neither here nor there. But I always felt that kind of worked.
Okay, yeah, Mariner is the lead girl, and then Brad Boimer.
And there's kind of a reveal about who she is, like at the end of the episode.
Yeah.
So it's like you're wondering why she's kind of singled out here for this. And why something else happens in the episode, then you kind of find out later why that happened in the episode. I don't know that I buy that premise, like, the volleying that they were doing.
Yeah, I wondered about that too. But there's at least an attempt at creating some interpersonal drama and having an ongoing story, but still having singular episodes. I don't expect this to be serialized in the same way that Discovery and Picard are. So I guess I like that they're doing it that way, but it's also kind of the typical structure for a cartoon like this. So, I don't want to give it too much credit, but...
No, I'm hoping it calms down a little bit, and tries to find its footing, but I don't have terribly high hopes. I'm going to say not feeling it, by the way.
Same here. So, I was pretty sure that that's the way the sign would go. I was hoping somehow I would be surprised. I mentioned earlier it's the wrong time for a thing like this. Mm-hmm. It's the wrong time because of the Orville, and because that is the show that a lot of Trek fans that they have not won over yet, and it's been a while. They need to start winning people over. It's not going to happen at this point, probably. I will tell you, nobody's going to be surprised by this if you've never heard me talk about new Trek before. I'm kind of just biding my time for all of this to finally fall apart. It has to at some point, because there's no way that Discovery and Picard are as successful as NBS are trying to make people think they are. The other streaming platforms do not want anything to do with them.
Yeah.
Netflix bankrolled Discovery's first season.
Really?
And wanted nothing to do with it afterwards, if they could help it. They had first rights of distribution and have continued to pass on things since then. Then Amazon, after Netflix passes on Picard, takes Picard. and then neither Netflix or Amazon would take this show. This show has no international distribution.
Wow.
No one wants it.
Wow.
I mean, that has to tell you. So I'm just biding my time, holding my breath. At some point, hopefully, when all of this blows over and somebody else can get their hands on it, we start getting something akin to, actual start. And at the very least, something that your kids can watch, because there's no reason for these things to be as, adult, but with a lowercase a, as they have been. So there's the... Sorry.
No, I'm listening to you. I'm
sorry.
Fascinated by what you're saying at the moment. There's something I'll say later, though.
I'm jumping. I'm jumping around. There is...
Fine.
There's So there's the Orville thing, and then there's the fact that I'm already watching a really raunchy show that is a parody of the thing that it is already, but is great, which is Harley Quinn. So you can't have Orville and Harley Quinn on, and then this.
It falls in a gray area that shouldn't be there. Like,
I just don't know who it's for.
It's between these things, and
the writing's not really quality, and so
not so far.
Even
in this first episode.
even if it was great, I'd be like, why does this exist? Like, it would still be kind of struggling to validate its existence, but at least it might be entertaining. This to me was not. But then also, why do you make a thing like this after years and years of Futurama? Like, I don't get it.
Certainly, you've got a point
Why
there.
was this the direction we went?
Like for real.
You can like animation is a great place for Star Trek because there's a lot of stuff that's difficult to do in live action that you want to see with Star Trek. We Star Trek fans have complained for decades that there can't be because it's expensive, and Discovery, to its credit, has done more of this kind of thing because it's got a budget and it looks impressive. It's been difficult for a long time until recently to do very much in the way of humanoid bipedal races, and you would expect some crazy looking other non-humanoid stuff. That's what you really wanted from the Delta Quadrant and Voyager, and we made them, a lot of the species there, even more generic looking, with some exceptions. And so in animation, you of course can put on screen anything you want to. I kind of like that because this is only the second animated series. Our Doctor is a cat person, like the cat person that we had in the animated series in the 70s. Like, that's fun.
So is that what they were going for?
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure that's why that's a cat person.
Did you get the feeling that the characterization of that cat doctor was a little bit like Bones-ish?
Yeah, but which is an obvious thing to do.
And I know that. So speaking of generic and of these characters, I felt we got a mixed bag of characters that were cookie cutter Star Trek, like Starfleet. You picked and choose different like stereotypical officer traits for a couple of these guys that were ancillary characters. They might be main bridge crew, but in this case, they're superfluous. They're extra,
right? Because they're not the characters.
Because they're not the main characters, right? But we got very cookie cutter there. We also got some characters that don't belong in Star Trek. I feel like from what we've seen before, and then we have characters that are anachronistic to Star Trek, like the cyborg. We just don't. Not that I'm aware of.
Why is that anachronistic?
Well, I feel like that doesn't fit real well to be purposefully genetically enhanced as a human.
The problem is it gets very complicated because they do that stuff in Discovery.
Okay.
And so we've got a show that is again trying to bank on nostalgia for people that love TNG in that era. But then it's also made by some of the same people, or at least they're involved, that made the other shows.
Gotcha.
So if you go through Picard, you're going to see the same kind of thing, where you're like, well, this stuff doesn't line up with what we saw in 24th Century, and it's because they're playing with stuff that they did in Discovery, and it doesn't matter that it took place 100 years earlier.
Gotcha.
So yeah, I mean, it's nice that we didn't have any more of that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's weird. Like, I never met a cyborg. It's like we don't have a whole lot of those in Starfleet. I didn't think but then the bigger question I had was I don't understand why that guy wants to be a cyborg. Like, he doesn't really talk about it.
Yeah.
I don't know why. all of that was just there for kind of gags in the moment, right? Like, we're not supposed to ask questions like, why do you have a program to give you stoic Vulcan anti-emotion signals?
Yeah, like I didn't understand that at all. I was like, that exists, like a Vulcan chip. What are you talking about? It's trying to suppress us. So he kept having glitches
that's
go
all
on.
It did? Because
I guess
maybe that's what it is.
It's a Vulcan chip, like to suppress his, like it's trying to suppress my emotions, and I'm like, why do you have that?
Okay.
Like I don't understand like what the
and maybe they'll flesh that out and there'll be a reason. But
it seemed like, based on one thing, they could give this as an explanation. Not that they've thought of this already, but based on the fact that, you know, he's like, can you believe that this happened? Like, what were the % chances that this happened? That this and during a code red situation, it didn't accept our, you know, comm badges. So, like, maybe as an engineer he likes to do more calculations, and maybe that's helping him with him, but I don't feel like they thought about that. I feel like that's something they could do.
But even so, that would be, you would think that would be a person that then wouldn't need that chip as much.
Right.
Like, what I didn't understand about that was that guy is supposed to be your kind of like typical not in touch with his feelings guy. And he's very analytical, and he's obsessed with science, and he finds science stuff exciting when everybody else finds it boring. And so we're supposed to be like, oh, you're boring and you're funny because you find things like diagnostics fun. Okay. And then the guy who, with the Vulcan suppressing thing constantly glitching out and not working, that
bugged me.
Is having difficulty like getting in touch with his feelings and understanding how to properly date a girl. So I don't understand why he needs the Vulcan suppressing thing, because it's like he already has that, but he's too Vulcan. The point of that character seems to be and again, it's very kind of stereotypical. You're supposed to have that in a Star Trek show, your Vulcan-like character. So you took. Wouldn't it be a lot more interesting if you had a character that was, like, really, really bombastic and had a hard time controlling their emotions, who wants to suppress them? No, you took the most stoic Vulcan guy and you gave him a chip to do that to him. I don't understand that.
Maybe that's why he was that way?
I don't think so, because it keeps glitching out. It seems like that's his personality is analysis over, you know, emotional pursuit.
Like, if you had a cyborg technology that glitched out that badly and caused you to like spasm, you wouldn't want them anywhere near a console.
Well, no, but of course they're not thinking about that because this is just a jokey farcy show.
Right, but like the jokey farcy shows that get it right do think about that type of thing.
Well,
like
no,
Rick and Morty.
But they don't necessarily if they want to be that out there. But this trying to be canonical Star Trek just can't. Or it just doesn't make any sense.
Well, no, I like that
It could be a parody to the point of barely having an internal logic, and if that's your internal logic, that's fine. Like Futurama would do that kind of thing. You know,
well, they take it to the extreme where, like, if someone's glitching out, they're going to cause the problem.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. This show wants to be that kind of thing. It feels like.
Yeah, it just
or doesn't know
get there.
What it,
it just didn't execute for me. Like,
yeah, and
I'll give it some time, maybe, but
we've talked about this more than I wanted to. This more than anything I've looked at in a long time is a thing that I almost didn't even want to dignify with a review. Like, why is this a thing? And I don't think that whether or not anybody watches this is a thing that anybody would remember down the road. Like, this is going to be that obscure, like, oh, you remember when there was a weird, raunchy Rick and Morty like Star Trek show? Like.
Well, heck, how many people actually go to the animated series of Star Trek anyway?
Even if it was good, I think that... But that's not just because it's animated, right? Like, okay, I mean, that's probably the main reason.
It
but
fell into obscurity,
right, but part of that's because of availability. For the longest time, there was no way to watch that show.
That's very true.
True. That was this sort of obscure, like, and because of the studio that made it, and, like, it wasn't on very long. Like, there are reasons that's... You know, that is kind of obscure.
This will be ultimately way more accessible, but people still won't go back to it.
This thing could be on, and I don't think it will be. Hopefully, these people aren't still making Star Trek in 5 years, but this thing could be on for 5 years, and it could be, like, really good. And because of the weird again, counterintuitive choice they made to do a Rick and Morty Star Trek show. I just don't think nobody wants this.
It's definitely not filling a need, that's for sure.
Yeah.
That's not to say they couldn't carve out a niche.
Well, and at the very least, it's not to say that. And I'm not saying that just because there are things somewhat like a thing that's a reason not to make it. And like, I don't mean to make. I know sometimes people don't like it when I say this. I don't mean to make a huge deal out of whether or not a thing is justifying its existence. It's just. Once again, I'm talking about that because of specifically what this is, because we're talking about Star Trek. Once again, we've got another new Star Trek show that's not Star Trek.
Right.
Like, and in doing that, it's got to be this like completely superfluous thing, and also it's not very good.
So let me ask this question: We've got an influx. We have a plethora of Star Trek shows out right now at the same time. Are they trying to, do they somehow think that they're in another golden age of Star Trek?
I mean, there may be some delusions there. I don't know.
I think there might be.
I'm going to call that delusions. I know there's people liking this stuff, certainly, but
but the people running it, the people greenlighting these projects, like, do they think that's what they're doing? Because, like why put
no, but I
much
just said
out?
that. No, but when I said I see it as delusions, people that like this stuff wouldn't agree with that. Is the point I'm making? But yeah, probably. I don't know.
Well,
anyway.
It's not for me at this point, but I'm willing to give it some time. Maybe.
Anyway, yeah, it's pretty not great. Anyway, well, thanks a lot for watching, folks. Leave your comments. Let us know if you saw this show or this pilot and what you thought of it. And we'll be back with more videos with you in the not too distant future. I was Captain Logan.
And I was Brandon.
Later, folks.